Thank you very much for waiting. This is going to be the last session. We started with a keynote address at the beginning, saying that the most important is the decision by our top leaders. We heard that in the keynote address. We are at a very important juncture of a climate crisis. Top leaders, what are they going to tell us? From here, I would like to hand it over to Ms. Kuniya, an anchor, to moderate this session. My name is Hiroko Kuniya. This is going to be the last session. This is the top leaders session. People who are here, the heads of local governments and the heads of companies, they are to lead decarbonization effort. At local governments, by 2050, zero emission targets have been announced. And at companies level, Renewable Energy 100 is being aimed at companies. And they are leading introduction of renewable energy. And also towards the government, they are asking for expansion of renewable energy. They are raising their voices. Let me give you some concrete examples. In July of this year, 34 prefectures comprise Council on Renewable Energy. This council has made a recommendation saying that by 2030, renewable energy should account for more than 40% of electricity. Also, 19 designated cities comprise Designated Cities Council on Renewable Energy, and they are calling for 45% by 2030. And they are asking this to be incorporated into the 6th Basic Energy Plan. The government's target of energy mix in 2030 is 22 to 24% of renewable energy. So what they are calling for is far in excess of what the government plans. Keizai Doyukai Association of Corporate Executives is also recommending that the renewable energy should account for 40% by 2030 in Japan's energy mix. So local governments and voices of corporations, these voices, are they going to drive the government to change? Non-state actors' roles are increasing, and we have the leaders today with us. In their respective regions, how are they going to drive decarbonization? In order to nudge companies to act, what can they do? From the standpoint of institutional investors, as well as from the position of the media, we want to ask what they think. So let me introduce the speakers, starting from my left, joining us online, Governor of Nagano Prefecture, Governor Shuichi Abe. Thank you very much for joining us. And next to him is Governor of Tokyo, Ms. Yuriko Koike. Nice to be here. And from Tokushima Prefecture, we have Mr. Kamon Izumi, Governor and President of the National Governors Association as well. So these three prefectures, all of them are saying that by 2050, they are targeting at zero emission. They have already made that declaration. Next to Mr. Izumi is from Nissay Asset Management, Mr. Hiroshi Ozeki, President and CEO. As an institutional investor, they are managing 13 trillion yen of assets. Nice to be here. And from Japan Times, we have Ms. Minako Suematsu, Chairperson and Publisher and President. From the standpoint of the media, we want to hear her thoughts. Starting with governance. In this COVID-19 pandemic, I'm sure that you're going through tremendous difficulties, and the environment and the economy, there has to be a virtuous cycle. You need to work on a virtuous cycle between the economy and the environment. The difficulties involved, because of COVID, we cannot disregard the risk of the future. So what are the thoughts that you have about the difficulty in implementing these measures? Starting with Mr. Izumi, President of the National Governors Association. Thank you very much, Ms. Kuniya. As you say, we are living in the age of with COVID. We have to prevent infection, but at the same time, step by step, we need to increase economic activity, and we need to also adapt to the new normal, conform to the new normal requirements. These are difficult. If we raise the activity of economic sphere, there's going to be a spread of infection, and we don't have any therapeutics. We don't have vaccines yet. How are we going to reactivate economic activity? And we need to take environmental measures at the same time. Corporations and the citizens are now persevering this difficulty. Do they have enough space in their hearts to think about the environment? These are some of the concerns that we have. But conversely speaking, now is the chance, because we were not able to do certain things in the past, but now it is possible to do those things. For example, young people in large cities, they are having difficulty working in a large city, and young students, they got accepted to a university, but they have never stepped onto the campus, and they lose their part-time jobs. Then they may decide that it's better off if they go back to their hometowns in the regions rather than staying in the city. So this is a return to nature. And obviously, now is the chance to think about the environment. And in a great environment, people can work from home, teleworking. 70% is the rate of teleworking at large companies. There could be satellite offices or workation. These are new style of working, new sets of values. As part of returning to nature, this is progressing. So these are the points that I would like to highlight. I'm also president of the National Governors Association, and as Ms. Kunya said, there are 34 prefectures, and more than 200 companies have gathered in this Council on Renewable Energy, and I'm also president of that council. So I would like to ask Japanese companies to come together to work on the environment and take measures against climate change. Mitigation measures are obviously needed, and adaptation as well as decarbonization. If Japanese companies could take the lead in that endeavor, if Japanese companies could show the model, and local governments would like to work with the central government to take this movement forward. Next, turning to Governor Koike, Climate Change Action, Japan Climate Action Summit 2020. Thank you for the invitation. The most important is action. Action itself is what is the most important. At the Tokyo Metropolitan Government in December of last year, we made Climate Crisis Action Declaration. We always had Climate Crisis Declaration, but we added the term action. This was issued in December of last year. As we heard from Minister Koizumi, he gave a strong message. He said that climate change is no longer, it's already in the arena of security. I served as Environment Minister for 3 years, and it was the longest serving term then, but it seems that Minister Koizumi is so powerful that he would like to replace me as the longest serving Environment Minister. And I'm sure I would like to work on this issue together with the central government. This has to do with national security, and I also had the chance to serve as defense minister. Arctic region is melting, so territorial disputes, fight over resources. When we think about those possibilities, this is a global issue, clearly. And in this COVID-19 pandemic, this has no regard for national boundaries, no national borders or prefectural borders. The virus doesn't regard such borders. So in Japan, as well as TMG in Tokyo, we are working on measures against COVID-19. As we heard from Governor Izumi just now, we are seeing unprecedented behavioral change. People's lifestyles are changing greatly. Flow of people, flow of goods, many changes are taking place. by 2050, CO2 emissions net zero being the target. Zero emission Tokyo has already been developed. But at the same time, we have to work on COVID-19 countermeasures. But there is not going to be any influence on zero emission strategy. There's not going to be any change to the strategy. We would like to leverage this COVID-19 pandemic to realize and achieve zero emission strategy. TMG, just yesterday, we made an announcement that with finance and the environment, by combining the two, we have a concrete example. We announced the issuance of a green bond. This is going to be our 4th year. A green bond. These bonds are being issued by corporations and local governments. I went to Paris, and Paris was issuing green bonds. And Japanese institutional investors were investing into such green bonds. As a result of that, Paris environment improves. I thought that that should be used in Tokyo. If we issue green bonds in Tokyo, 10 billion to individual investors and 20 billion for corporations, please subscribe. They will be sold out within a day. For improving the environment, the funding can be used as resource to improve the environment so that Tokyo can be a superior environmental city. Finance and the environment could be combined in our effort as we move forward. That is needed. And I always talk about mind, technology, and body. Cool Biz is a typical example of that. We have to change our mindset, and we have to make use of technology to improve the technology of air conditioning. And body is system, institutions. These three must be combined together to make things happen in the world. And Cool Biz was an embodiment of that with the cooperation of people. With COVID-19, people are wearing masks, sanitizing their hands, and improving the environment. If we raise our awareness, and if with technology, ventilation technology, as well as plexiglass being used in various places, and if we have the right systems, institutions in place, when we have these three things in place, we can make things happen in the world. Climate change and global environment, we have to have these three components work together. And I would solicit your cooperation at this opportunity. Governor Abe, economy and environment, creating and implementing a virtuous cycle. There are difficulties, toughness. What are your thoughts?
My observation, sense of crisis is that for the presidential population and for the Japanese population, it's about the awareness or lack of that. And for us, local government, Shinjiro Koizumi was very encouraging in his message, but the matter of climate change needs the cooperation of all sectors. Vertically divided government is one problem, and those challenges also have to be overcome. The awareness of the Japanese population and the population of the prefecture, they are all changing for the better, becoming more proactive. In the past, I worked at the Yokohama City government, and I was already working for climate change countermeasures. Back then, like more than 10 years ago, in Yokohama TICAD conference, Tokyo International Conference on African Development, is organized, and Wanga Maatai, who passed away, the Nobel Prize laureate, talked about carbon justice. She was so convincing in her own words. From that time, the African leaders were announcing that Africa already has observed the climate impact because of their vulnerability, and they were all saying that action is needed. But back at that time, the response of Japan was not serious enough, according to my recollection. However, as we deal with global warming, we have to expand and increase our effort. In Nagano Prefecture, already we have had our prefectural environmental policies to reduce CO2 emission, but to continue the economic activity. Decoupling between the two has been part of our goal. As a result, in Nagano Prefecture, the prefectural GDP is rising, but at the same time, year after year, there is steady reduction of emission. So we are seeing positive results, but massive amount of effort is still required. As the prefecture, in December of last year, we have declared climate emergency, and we announced that we will go zero emission. That is because this is the 1-year anniversary. There was the East Japan typhoon disaster. African leaders spoke about famine, climate disaster, border conflicts. But all of that is rooted in climate change. They were calling to us in a loud voice, but now we understand that it is our own matter as well. Because of the typhoon damage last year, we declared a climate emergency and we decided to go zero emission. This is the first anniversary. So from all over Japan, we have received a kind of support. Ms. Koike is there. From Tokyo Metropolitan Government, we have been greatly supported, and we are so grateful when we were shattered by the typhoon. So not only countries like Africa that might be vulnerable, but also in Japan, the real risks and dangers have been exposed clearly. Having said that, because of the consensus at the prefectural assembly, we declared a climate emergency, and in last month, the ordinance to be decarbonized by the proposal of a member of assembly and from the Communist Party to the ruling LDP. Again, this ordinance was adopted by unanimity in the prefecture assembly. So for the prefecture as a whole and by the entire resident of the prefecture, that we are going to deal with climate change, that we are going to reduce emission, there is a very high momentum. We have an advantage because the so-called heavy old industry is not concentrated. Plus, considering the tourism, taking action of climate is going to be very appealing to the global community that we are a good tourist destination. And because of that understanding, many of the assembly person and the resident are very cooperative and understanding. Earlier, Governor Koike mentioned, but also in Nagano, because we declared a climate emergency, from this year, we have started to issue green bond. As the prefecture, ESG investment will be promoted. Railway construction organization has issued sustainability bond, and we are thinking about such investment. So through these financial activities, we wish to deal with climate change. And just one point, there is Governor Izumi, and at the National Governors Association, there is a project team to promote zero emission prefectures, and I'm working together with Mr. Izumi, and I am the leader of the project team. Ms. Kuniya earlier mentioned about our proposal to the central government as the Governors Association or the project team on zero carbon by 2050, a CO2 zero emission should be declared. That is what we are requesting the central government to adopt. Shinjiro Koizumi also mentioned earlier, at the prefectural level, 22 prefectural governments have declared that they will go to CO2 zero emission by 2050. At the Governors Association, we want to work in solidarity, and because Minister Koizumi kindly appreciates our effort and support us, we want to work with the central government, Ministry of Environment, and work harder. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What concerns us is the development of corporations. I have a question for institutional investors. Companies' business performance is deteriorating as a result of COVID-19. So the momentum for ESG investing to grow, I'm concerned whether there is any stop in such movements, because if your short-term profits are deteriorating, are they able to move to decarbonization? Are they able to conduct climate change countermeasures? Izumi-san, as you engage with companies, what are your feelings that you get? I've been involved in investing and involved in institutional investors, Paris Agreement and SDGs adoption. In response to that, there has been a trend made. And that trend has been accelerated. In that trend, from asset management standpoint, what is happening? In this COVID-19, something interesting is happening. In terms of dealing with companies, there is bifurcation or triple forking. At Nisei Asset, ESG evaluation, we give evaluation.
And the best company should be number 1, and the next best should be number 2. And if the lower company is number 3, then ESG assess that the top or the bottom, there are significant differences. Of course, the better in terms of ESG scoring, the corporate performance is better. So our ESG investment, the total market cap might be declining, but still our investees are recording very high business performances. This ESG assessment, there are different dimensions or criteria. What to measure? At our company, E or the S, when such efforts are made in environmental society, is it in alignment with the business model? And by promoting environmental effort, would that be a contribution to increasing the cash flow of that company? And same with society. So whether it leads to increase in cash flow inflow, that is what we measure. Whether ESG is really embedded in the fundamental policy, that is how we rate in terms of ESG, including this pandemic. And from the end of December last year until the end of September this year, in the last 9 months, companies rated number 1 and number 3. The return is different by 20%. So for companies who are doing good with ESG, they are really sustainable. And despite the pandemic, they are able to enjoy revenue and the return, no problem with business continuity, and the risk is low. So in terms of the performance, in the last 10 years, our rating has proved, and even in the recent 9 months, in particular the environment factor, when the score is high, they do very good despite the pandemic. And of course, there is no guarantee that because their latest performance is good, of course, you are self-responsible for your investment. I do not guarantee that these companies will do fine into the future. But as companies try to deal with climate and the pandemic, I think this trend of the link will continue for the time being.
In this crisis, the results of what you have been working in the past is now starkly visible. Suematsu-san, you're with the Japan Times, you're chairperson, publisher, and president, creating an ESG consortium to disseminate information to overseas investors. What are your thoughts and what do you see?
At the Japan Times, we want to communicate the true status and the future of Japan to all the audience. I know you know better than myself, but in 1897, back then, there were English newspapers issued by non-Japanese, but to use the Japanese language from the Japanese perspective, we worked with Ito Hirofumi and Shibusawa Eiichi, and Japan Times was established. About ESG The reason why we started the promotion consortium, compared to 120 years ago, nothing had changed in Japan. That was our strong feeling. As a media, we do report the day-to-day affairs, but what is happening in Japan today, I am listening to the three governors, but these activities or declarations, are they disseminated in the English language to the world? And this applies to Japanese businesses as well. They are so humble and they are so reticent, do not advertise. So I want to support all of you to send out your effort, and that is why Japan Times started the ESG Promotion Consortium. So if you can leverage our media, there are increasing users and local government authorities. By no mistake, the metropolitan government is capitalizing on Japan Times and Suntory Holding. They are using our pages. By using the Japanese media to send out the messages important, we want to ask you to use Japan Times. By using the pages of Japan Times, if Japanese companies and the organizations can be exposed in the Japanese language and in the rule-making and decision-making in the global community, we want the Japanese stakeholders to be more influential.
Decarbonization effort must be accelerated throughout the day. We have been hearing about that, especially Dr. Emori. In his speech, under COVID-19, there is a brake stepped on in the world economy, and because of that, CO2 emissions for the full year is likely to be down 7% year on year. 7% cut in CO2 emissions, according to Dr. Emori from Center for Global Environment Research, National Institute for Environmental Studies. If we want to limit temperature rises to 1.5 degrees, minus 7%, this reduction must be continued every year to achieve that target. So what happened in COVID-19, this such a rapid break that was stepped upon in CO2 emissions. We cannot achieve our goal unless we continue to reduce emissions by 7% every year to reach 1.5 degrees limit. Well, the speed of decarbonization, Mr. Sueyoshi said that there is a tectonic change. Now, local governments, you have made announcements that you will achieve zero emission by 2050. How do you urge people to use more widely use of renewable energy? How do you intend to achieve that? Can you make your answers shorter this time, starting with Governor Abe?
I will try to be short. At Nagano, we are trying to overcome this climate challenge. 70% reduction of final energy consumption, and the use of renewable should be tripled. We do have some specific numerical targets regarding the renewable energy. As a local government authority, the local resources must be capitalized at maximum. We want a local circulatory economy in the region. In our prefecture, hydro energy, micro hydro, we have lots of good sites, and we have the largest number of micro hydro. And it might be surprising, but we do have lots of sunshine. We have long hours sunshine, so micro hydro, using existing dams, hydro energy and solar energy use are expanded. One message which is characteristic: solar potential map is made for the entire prefecture. All the buildings, if the roofs of all the construction in our prefecture, whether they are suitable for solar panels, by using all the roofs, we are trying to make a pool purchase system of solar panels. Then all of a sudden we can expand the rooftop panels. Governor Koike is with us, but expanding renewables collaboration between local cities and urban cities are important. At our corporate bureau, Shinshu Green Electricity is a project. Generated electricity is sold outside of our prefecture. For example, at the nurseries in Setagaya of Tokyo, our electricity is used. Little children are using Nagano electricity, and they are learning about Nagano Prefecture at the nursery schools. Little kindergarten kids are using our electricity. So expansion of renewable, we are going to be even more aggressive. And we still have more potential to be utilized. We are going to do more. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Koike. At Tokyo Metropolitan Government, obviously Tokyo is the largest energy consumption region, and we have the largest emissions of CO2. We have so many buildings in Tokyo. So from 2010, we already have introduced the cap and trade system. And the effect of that is already being seen. For example, this is the 11th such year, and the number that we see today is the actual results of 2018 compared to the standard emission rate. We have already achieved a 27% reduction in CO2 emissions. So in terms of mind, technology, and body, it's the body that is really producing these cuts. We see large buildings constructed every year, but this cut being maintained every year means that the system is working, and buildings are created with that in mind. So CO2 emissions, more than 70% of emissions come from buildings. So in order to achieve zero emissions, we need to have zero emission buildings. This notion must be realized in practice. And you need to set the example. So the first building of the Tokyo Metropolitan Government, we have 2 towers with more than 20,000 employees working. And one of the buildings, building number 1, where my office is located, we have already made a switch in our electricity. We took the initiative to switch over to renewable energy. And this is already RE100, 100% renewable energy is powering building number 1. And other facilities from those households that have graduated from FIT arrangements would provide electricity to other facilities. And for those people who are newly installing solar panels, those for graduated FIT producers, if they use their power for energy storage, means that they will be resilient to disasters. They can produce energy in their homes, and they can use that energy at home, and they can be prepared for disaster times. So there are 3 benefits to be enjoyed. And renewable energy usage at homes is now being promoted. So joint purchasing of renewable energy, not just in Tokyo, but prefectures in the large, greater metropolitan area are purchasing renewable energy together. We call this Miden campaign. People who have graduated from FIT arrangements, they are the first ones to employ solar power generation. They have a high level of awareness. So we want them to continue to have such high levels of awareness. So it is with that idea that we need to work toward. Thank you. Moving to Tokushima Prefecture, if we look at your target by 2030, it used to be 40%, but now you have raised the bar to 50% cut by 2030, and self-sufficiency in terms of renewable energy constituting 50%. How do you intend to achieve this target? What is most important is prefectural citizens as well as people in businesses. We need to change their mindset. And peacetime as well as disaster times, we need to be doing this for both of these times. In May of 2002, Tokushima is now named environmental city. Tokyo is the metropolis, capital of Japan. There are places where the citizens cannot go. For example, the parliament. So in the case of Tokushima, Tokyo and Osaka and the Pacific Belt region, what they cannot do, for example, reduction of global warming gases, greenhouse gases, as well as introduction of renewable energy, we can have higher targets. For example, fixation of CO2, sink measures of forests. Those are the measures that we can implement at the regions. 26%, the government's target. According to the past calculation method, we have already cleared that in 2016. 1 month before going into effect of Paris Agreement, climate change promotion ordinance was enacted by our prefecture, and mitigation and adaptation measures. We are actually ahead of the government's measures, and for businesses, we are giving them business opportunities, including agriculture. And just last year, we have the presidency of Council of Renewable Energy, so 50% cut vis-a-vis 2030, and introduction of renewable energy, 50% is the target. Peacetime is not enough. We need to be also prepared for disaster times. In Western Japan, the largest scale solar panels are being organized by public companies, but that is not meaningful enough. As we saw in East Japan earthquake, there could be shortage of power supply to evacuation centers. Then we should have EV cars and plug-in hybrid to be used as running, driving power plants to introduce solar power to provide and supply electricity to evacuation centers. This is a social experiment. We already did this in 2013 ahead of other regions. So peace times and disaster times and the second round of regional revitalization in each of the regions. Companies do not grow in these rural regions, but if you install solar power in abandoned agricultural land, there could be viable business. So in Council for Renewable Energy, if it is for solar power, you have to have people in the plant, because in corporate tax, the tax will be paid to the head office. So in revitalization of regions, in the regions, if new companies who introduce renewable energy, we are making recommendations so that the tax revenue can be enjoyed in the regions, peacetime, disaster times, and revitalization of the regions. That could make this feasible. But the most important here is the next basic energy plan of the central government. In this plan, renewable energy must be implanted. In the fifth plan, there are recommendations from the council to make renewable energy mainstream energy. 22 to 24% is lower, but compared to 20%, which was before, we are making progress. We used to say 30% in 2030, but we have to aim at 40% or above by 2030, and if possible, we should have a cut of 50%. Or we should have 50% of renewable energy. We want to drive this forward. If other prefectures cannot do this, Tokushima would like to take the lead. And we are steadily making progress, setting a high target to drive the central government from the regions. So depending on the region, you have abundant renewable energy resource. There are regions that are able to tap renewable energy easily. And many companies say that even if they wanted to use renewable energy in Japan, they cannot procure a sufficient amount of renewable energy. And as a result of that, governors I would like to ask you what your thoughts are. In order for renewable energy to grow, maybe we need something like carbon pricing. We hear such voices. What kind of authority should be granted to local governments? What policies would be amenable for such a drive? We heard from Governor Izumi just now, but Governor Abe and Governor Koike, if you have any requests for the central government, can you talk about them? Starting with Governor Koike. As we heard from Governor Izumi, to the central government, first, by 2050, zero emission, net zero. In order to realize this, renewable energy should be introduced ambitiously. We need to have a target, and we need to have a pathway to get there clearly. And renewable energy should be made core energy source. We should accelerate this as much as possible. The government, central government system, there are certain things that the local ordinance can do, but there are things that the central government must do at the central level, and they should work hand in hand. That is what is mostly needed. Governor Abe?
Basically, in the case of renewable energy, depending on the different locality, advantages are different. So basically, a more decentralized society in terms of authority and the finance, basically decentralization is important. More specifically, for example, in the case of Nagano, within the ordinance to prevent global warming, when buildings are constructed, they are mandated to look at the environmental effect, and it is mandatory to think about using renewable. So the mandate is always to think about. There is the energy saving law for construction, and it was not applied to residential construction. The relationship between national legislation and the prefectural ordinance, where there is legislation, it cannot be added on by prefectural ordinances. There are lots of discussions, but regarding construction or buildings in Japan, Japanese buildings are lagging behind in terms of dealing with climate change, but there's a limit to what prefectures can do. There must be more authority given to the prefecture, or either the government, central government does more. I want this to be considered.
Governor Izumi, let me just supplement very briefly. At the regions, renewable energy is being produced more and more, and Council on Renewable Energy. For example, Kyushu Electric Power, curtailment has been implemented, and 41 times is the number of times curtailment was ordered. In the Tohoku region, there's a lot of wind. Same is true for Hokkaido. But the grid, for example, Hokkaido and Honshu, grid connection is very thin. So it's very difficult to accept such power. So from the Council on Renewable Energy, on curtailment, we are making recommendations that there should be more spare capacity and that grid connections should be made thicker. And this fiscal year, finally, the central government and the electric power companies have started to make a move. A totally different perspective from my side. As we heard from Governor of Nagano, we should put a stop to the study period. We need to implement now. I completely concur with that because the rest of the world is moving at an accelerated speed to move towards zero emissions. The same is true for SDGs. They're moving very fast. If we are left behind, the key word is not to leave anyone behind. Well, we have to make sure that we don't get left behind. And the energy prices, compared to 10 years ago, the prices are changing. So hydrogen. Next year, we will host the Olympic Games that's been postponed from this year. Hydrogen could be a symbol. Fuel cell buses or torch relay, or the torch could make use of hydrogen. So hydrogen as an energy source, if this is created from renewable energy, ultimately it is going to be CO2 free, so we could create new industries. We could secure international competitiveness. The environment and economy could be reconciled. So this is something that is needed for both the economy and the environment. So hydrogen is another project that Tokyo would like to work upon. Business sector people, you have been listening to this conversation. We need to accelerate this transformation. In this COVID-19, I believe that companies responded quickly to COVID-19. Now responding to climate change. If they are able to respond to climate change as quickly as companies did to COVID-19, energy transformation and expansion of renewable energy usage, more progress could be achieved. What is lacking? What needs to be done so that companies would invest more? Nudge them in that direction.
In that regard, as we engage in different businesses, and in particular when we speak with energy companies, just like what Ms. Koike mentioned about renewables, investment in overseas renewable businesses, there are many companies, utilities and gas, Japanese companies investing outside of Japan. It's like the story of the green bond discussed earlier. Back in 2010, the green bond by the city of Paris, back at that time at Nippon Life Insurance, I was responsible for investment. And I was investing in the green bond. And indeed, I did invest in the Metropolitan Green Bond. So in Japan, commercially viable renewable business investment opportunities are insufficient if it is done inside Japan. Compared to investment project outside of Japan, it's expensive or return is not attractive. This is what we hear. So from investors' perspective, I may exaggerate to reduce the risk and to raise the return. That kind of policy must be done by the whole of government effort in order to reduce the risk, as has been discussed. The energy mix in the energy policy, if the renewable can be expanded in the mid and longer term, if there is explicit goal, our investment would not be wasteful. So that means a lower investment risk. In order to expand the return, Governor Koike mentioned about programs that have graduated from FIT. The feed-in tariff did have many challenges indeed, lessons learned. But in order to drive these efforts, learning from the FIT, by learning the lessons, it could be like FIT 2.0, FIT 4.0, or something new, FIT, to support the return, to prop up the return. That policies are important. And because there is capital and there is a will to invest.
Individual assets, cash and deposits in excess of 1,000 trillion yen. So there is money. If there is something attractive arranged, there is going to be more people who want to invest. Ms. Suematsu, what do you think? In order to accelerate this transformation for climate change, what do you think?
Indeed, because of the pandemic, everybody is so hurt and burnt, so to say. But because of the disasters in different places, everybody is becoming aware that the climate disaster is everyone's problem. I hail from Hiroshima Prefecture, including the hilly and mountainous areas. There are landslide and water cut and electricity lost. And depending on one lifeline, we have all directly felt the pain and the danger. And Japan Times, of course, reports such cases, and the wisdom and the lessons are disseminated in English language, like in Maniwa of Okayama, Suo of Yamaguchi. Their experiences and efforts are shared outside of Japan.
Mr. Oizumi, supply chain should be included for decarbonization. Otherwise, you will not be a company that will be selected. For example, Apple, in all of the processes, they are aiming towards zero emission. Then SMEs who are not that with stamina, if they need to procure renewable energy, if they are exposed to such competition, as an investor, how do you think you are able to support such people at the businesses? How do you change their mindset? What do you do to encourage that?
Yes, to support companies, we have to support not very strong small and medium-sized enterprises, but to decarbonize supply chain wide, to promote RE100. According to what I heard, Apple is trying to go 100% renewable, but as long as there is business in Japan, they fear that RE100% is not possible because of their footprint in Japan. In order to go renewable 100% in Japan, if there is the renewable energy, then demand exists. Even if you're small and medium, in our engagement and dialogue, the effort in E&S, environment and society, under this pandemic, to promote digitalization or to advance going paperless, changing infrastructure, there was no time to lose. You can't wait until the climate change is better to be kind for you. No management can wait, and the climate is the same. No time to wait. We have to take this positively. To be a supplier of RE100 participants, to work on the E&S so that you'll be invited as a supplier in terms of product, raise traceability, better supply chain. By raising the effort, companies with high awareness, there could be new, fresh deals from European and American companies, and there are actual cases where they have found a new business. So countering climate is not only increased expenses. This is a positive opportunity. It's a business model transformation so that you find new business partners or new distribution channels. I'm sure that this is a positive.
If that is assessed in a positive way, companies will have more motivation to change. Within your local governments, you have SMEs within your prefectures. If they try to decarbonize, to be a company that is selected as part of the supply chain, financial measures as well as assistance in their business management. Are you taking any such measures? Governor Izumi, in Tokushima, we want to be an environmental city, so introduction of renewable energy is promoted. We give subsidies, loans. From the get-go, we have introduced such measures. So when you ask us whether we were able to do this, yes, we have sufficiently achieved that. So we should give them a push, and we should read and anticipate what is to come. We have to make that easy to understand. So carbon pricing, in terms of measuring the effectiveness, for companies as well as for citizens, it's easy to understand. I have been instructed to bring the session to a close because all of these leaders here are very busy in their schedules. So having listened to this discussion, non-state actors, local governments are front-leaning, very positive, in encouraging usage of renewable energy, producing renewable energy. And this is becoming a push for companies, including the supply chain, so that there is a momentum for Japanese companies to be selected in the world. This was a top leaders session. Sorry, we have run out of time. I'd like to thank the panelists for their active participation. Ms. Kuniya, top leaders, thank you very much. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all the speakers today from the other side of the screen. Thank you so much. With this climate crisis, challenges, what were your thoughts, the audience of this conference? Concurrently with this summit, there is a review of Japan's basic energy plan is underway. And as that discussion takes place for review of the basic plan, there is the sense of crisis of climate change, that we would not be selected as part of global supply chain. And the voices of leaders, a tectonic change is taking place. That is what we have shared in this Japan Climate Action Summit. Whether this is going to be reflected in the review of Basic Plan, 2020 and 2021 are going to be very important years for Japan. Climate change policy, energy policy, these two are up for review in this period. At Japan Climate Initiative, we were approving and agreeing with the Paris Agreement, but we need to go toward net zero, and we have to form a group who will be taking action right now. So I do hope that many of you will join us in our initiative. And with this, we would like to bring this Japan Climate Action Summit 2020 to a close. Thank you very much for your attendance.